We are recording this meeting. It is in a meeting format instead of a webinar. Please let us know if you have any difficulties seeing any shared screens. And thank you so much.
I want to welcome all guests and members. It is just a little bit after 8:30. We're going to get started to be respectful of everyone's time. Rick Rivers will continue to sign people in as you join us. Just a reminder that for regular members, you're required to attend 2 meetings during the fiscal year from September through June. And of course, these Zoom meetings do count. We would also like to thank our 2021 sponsors, in particular, the 5 Platinum sponsors: Canandaigua National Bank and Trust Company Wealth Management, ESL Trust Services, LLC, Finger Lakes Financial Services, Inc., Welker, Modseg, and DeVelchio, Woods Oviatt Gilman, LLP. Now, if your company would like to be a gold or silver sponsor, those are still available. The 5 platinum sponsorships are sold out for this year. Please contact the Estate Planning Council office or Vicki Klehammer of EFPR Group. Now, because of our new format today, the speaker evaluation form will not pop up on your screen at the end, but it will be sent to you through your email. Now, this is our first time having a breakout session. So in the evaluation, we would appreciate very much your feedback on the content of the program, as well as the networking opportunity. Lawyers who need CLE credit, code numbers will be provided during the program, and you will need to record those numbers on your evaluation. And now I'd like to turn the program over to Don Twitmeyer to introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Lorraine. Before we introduce today's program on succession planning, and for the sake of transparency for our attorney participants, we did find out over the weekend that the CLE Review Board rejected the program for CLE credit, although we do have continuing education credits for all of the other professions. Now, we plan to appeal that decision, but we'd also ask for your help in doing so, especially from our attorney participants. As you know, we can't get CLE credit for any program unless there's an attorney who is also presenting. And we were fortunate today to have Joy Plotnick from Canandaigua National Bank, who's also an attorney, has agreed to be the attorney of record for this program and will be available to answer any legal questions that you may have. If you do have questions of a legal nature, we would ask our attorney participants to put those in the chat box. And so we'll, at the end of the program, there's going to be time for questions and answers, and they'll try and address those programs. But we want to make sure that there are some legal content here, so when we do the appeal, we can point out to the CLE Review Board that there was benefit to the attorneys, and legal questions were also addressed in the program. We would also ask that the attorneys provide more feedback on the evaluation form than we otherwise would have, or send an email directly to myself at dtweetmeyer@trevecchristo.com and send us the reasons as to why you as an attorney feel that this program was beneficial to your practice. And we'll try and include a lot of those comments in our appeal to the CLE Review Board. I'm not sure if it's just a problem with this particular program or the fact they're reviewing these programs from home, and so they don't have the benefit of talking to each other at the CLE board office when we normally submit these programs. So with that in mind, I want to introduce the speakers for today. There's Dr. James Kestenbaum, who's founder and president of the Pittsburgh-based Solutions Group, which assists companies both locally and nationally with business succession issues. He is a corporate psychologist with a PhD from the University of Maryland in counseling psychology with a specialization in industrial organizational psychology. His psychology background is especially helpful when advising families about business succession issues, as most of you already know that you encounter a lot of those types of issues in this area. Kevin Best, an estate planning council member and past president, is owner of Best Times Financial Planning, a Brighton, New York business which provides financial planning and estate planning services to businesses and individuals. He received his BA from SUNY Buffalo and his MS from the University of Rochester, and is a certified financial planner and accredited estate planner. He advises individuals and business owners on how their tax, business, investment, cash flow, and family situation issues relate to each other, and frequently advises them on business succession issues. Our last speaker is Joy Ryan Plotnick, an estate planning council member who is an attorney that currently serves as senior vice president and senior trust officer with Canandaigua National Bank and Trust Company. She previously served as president and trust officer with the Genesee Valley Trust Company before its merger into CNB. She received her BA from Brandeis University and her JD from Boston University School of Law, and is a member of the Trust and Estates section of the Monroe County Bar Association. In her role at the bank, she works with families to develop and implement an overall strategy that integrates their investment, philanthropic, tax, and estate planning goals into coordinated wealth management plan. Those are our speakers today, and without any further introductions, please welcome me in welcoming Jim, Kevin, and Joy to today's program. Thank you.
Don, thank you. Also, thank you for the nice introduction for the three of us. So in an hour, we're going to cover a lot of territory. I've been working with family businesses since 1989. So I've worked in a lot of family businesses. They're all different. I have hundreds of stories. What I want to try to do today, though, is emphasize a few things. The first one, if you can go to the next page, please, Karen. There we go. It's the importance of taking a multidisciplinary approach. That when I've been able to be the most successful in succession, I'm not the team, I'm a member of the team. And by all of us, as to say, putting all of our brains in the game from all the disciplines within EPC. So attorneys, accountants, financial planners, trust officers, that as we all work with each other, there are different times in what might be called the succession roadmap that we each need to be able to be involved. And doing that also in a certain order helps, which means to make a multidisciplinary approach work, we have to talk with each other. That's something I learned right at the beginning of my career. It still holds true. I'm going to talk today about what's the role of what we might call a behavioral expert. It's not therapy. So some people think, well, Jim, you're a licensed psychologist, so are you going to do family therapy? No, I'm not. Can I do therapy? Yeah, I have the skill to do it, but that's not what succession is about. I'm trying to help a family control its dynamics, be objective, come up with a plan, execute it, and if all the cards are in the right place, be able to get to the next gen. So if you speak to any of my clients, what they like is that I don't sound like a shrink, and I don't take that as an insult, I actually take it as a compliment. They also have a very specific skill set, and in that skill set, I am able to assist family businesses in one aspect of succession. So I can't do a buy sell. I can't sell key man insurance or key person insurance. I don't know how to set up a family trust. I don't know how to do anything you all do, but I know those things are important. So I know if I was working with a family business yesterday, and I said, just out of curiosity, where are you with your attorney and accountant in terms of looking at the way that you're going to start moving equity to your kids? So I know to say that. I don't know how to actually move equity to the next generation, but I know that they need to be thinking about that. And that's important not only for the current gen to know, it's important for the next gen to know. So in my skill set of, I've been doing executive coaching, leadership assessment, and culture change for 30 years. I've been trained in family therapy. I used to have a full-time clinical practice, so I can be in front of people who are upset. I don't find that upsetting. I remain very objective and I can help them to calm down. So that's the corporate psychologist skill set. Next page, please. So the goals for today is to provide a clear picture of the value add of involving a corporate psychologist who takes a multidisciplinary approach. As a subset of that also, that when you look at succession planning, you're trying to bring together two things that sometimes don't mesh real well. We just lost the slide though. Karen, if you can get back to page 2.
Sorry.
That's all right. I can keep on talking while Karen's doing that. That you're mixing together a business process, a legal process, and a financial process with a family who loves each other, wants to be with each other, and has the best intentions for each other. If you think of that as like two concentric circles, sometimes those overlap really well, and sometimes they don't. So I have family businesses that the family loves each other, they get along well with each other, and they have the will and focus to be able to complete succession. I've been in family businesses where they treat each other like strangers, yell and scream, and in one, I had a daughter knock out her father, physically knock him out of a seat. That was the low point of my career, unfortunately. So, so I've seen it all. And what I'll always say is that if you want to see a functional family business scratch the surface, you get to meet the functional family. If you see a dysfunctional family business scratch the surface, you get to meet the dysfunctional family. And in my multi-pronged skill set, I can deal with all those different things. What I also want to, so the next part in the slide would be, I want to show how professionally dealing with family drama done in business terms has business value. So I know sometimes people talk about what I do is, oh, Jim's got soft skills. Not actually. That I think all of you have your own examples of families that are in disarray. And my ability to get them refocused, stay on track, complete the process has business value. There's a chart I remember, if you all know Bob Fox, who I don't know what Eldridge Fox and Peretti is now called. It's a longer name with a lot of initials. But I remember he used to present a slide when he and I would work with each other in family businesses. And the slide showed that the longer you go past a certain prime point in time in succession, the business successively loses actual value. It's a stunning chart. So that the whole idea of getting the drama under control and getting succession to proceed, it's not just makes people feel better, it has actual business and financial value. The other thing I want to accomplish today is to give you all some opportunity. It's going to be in the exercise we're going to do in the breakout rooms to explore how using behavioral expertise facilitates the succession process. The last part in terms of just the setup for today, if you have questions, I think, Karen, you can bring up a chat box probably on the right side. So feel free to put chat questions in there. We're going to try to get to those, but as I'll note at the end, again, that any questions I don't get to, since this is being recorded and probably you can print off the chat box, I will answer every single person's questions. It may take me a couple of days, but I'll be glad to answer any question you ask. Let's go on then. Karen, can you take us up to page 3? It says at the top, the behavioral emotional elements of succession. So in this time of COVID, these things do happen. Oh, there it is. I don't have to make my big speech. So there are some specific elements in the succession roadmap that are behavioral and they're emotional. So the top statistic, my guess is you all know that. Success in succession, the odds are not great. So if you look at it, to get to the second gen, there's a 30% chance. To get to the third gen, there's a 13% chance. Why is that? So truth be told, some businesses should only last one generation. So mom and dad have a bakery. None of the kids want to become bakers. They all moved away from Rochester. And they decided when it was done, they saved well for their retirement, set up everything the right way, which means they worked with a couple of you, 2 or 3 of you. And the business went out of business. And that was the natural course of things. But in some percentage of time, the reason that the company does not get to the next generation is that the family just can't work with each other, particularly across the generations. So my first case example, working, so I will not use names or anything, so I want to maintain all the confidentiality, but working with a family business, the business was financially very successful. That's usually not a surprise to me when the family is also dysfunctional. And I remember they were at my office and they could not stop yelling at each other. And I make little quips saying, you know, there's a daycare center outside my office door. You guys are scaring the children. Please be respectful. I have some better tricks now than about 6, 7 years ago, but they wouldn't stop screaming. So years later, turns out the father and I have the same chiropractor. So I said, I never found out what happened. What happened? He said, oh, we sold it. Our son opened up his own business. We retired. I'm just up here for a few days. I live in Florida now. It was sad. It was a going concern. And also, a lot of non-family members lost their jobs because the business got sold and got absorbed into some gigantic corporation. So there are some things that you can do to beat those odds. And so one is have a long time frame. I think the accepted wisdom, it takes 12 to 13 years to complete succession. So I've been doing succession planning since '89, so over 30 years. I think it can be done faster. So I'm working in a business right now. The main transition is going to happen in 2 years. I'm working in another business. The main transition is going to happen in 4 to 5 years or less. But the longer you have, the better. When somebody comes to me and, you know, an owner and says, I want to be out of the business in 6 months, that's hard, particularly if they've not prepared the heirs. Second thing is developing heirs. So I was working with a family business yesterday, and we were talking about they need to build better infrastructure and processes and metrics, and they were realizing we don't really speak in that language. We should do that to facilitate succession and ready the business, and we've not done enough training of our children to take this over in probably about 3 to 4 years. So they said we probably need to start doing training. I said, you do. And the first thing I said to the father, I said, you know so much about this business, you don't meet with your kids. And I want to start seeing coaching programs where you just share business knowledge. The main one I wanted to share actually is finance. A lot of the up and coming generation does not know enough about finance. Next, emotional intelligence. Probably many of you know what that is, but the quick version is it's having the self-control to understand your emotions, control them, which makes you objective in that what you look at, and make the most successful interpersonal relationships. So EI has been a very solid part of the business world since just about the turn of the millennium, right around the late 90s. That if a family can keep cool, calm, and collected, doesn't mean they're not going to have conflicts, but if they can do those things, they have a better success rate. Shifting owner mindset from operational to strategic, and we'll talk about that later. One of the first questions I ask family business when I'm working with them is to the owners, do you foresee a time that you will no longer control the business? If they say yes, we get to the second question, which is, are you and your spouse, do you have all the money you need today to retire in the way that you would like to? So, you know, in the back of my mind, I'm always praying, going, I hope I get yes to both questions. If they're willing to give up operating control, it means that the parents are not going to keep on interceding in the business and creating disruption, which I've been in those scenarios before. If they have enough money to retire, they don't see the business as their only big asset and feel the need to micromanage the kids or they're going to go broke. So those questions actually happen within the first 15 minutes of me meeting them, because it sets the tone for what we're going to do. If they're not willing to do those things, I don't say, well, you can't do succession. What I do say to them is that let's explore that. I try to understand what's the reason for that. And there can be a number of reasons. One is the parents, just the business wasn't successful early on. That's why they don't have the money. Reason to not to give up operating control, they don't think their kids can run it, and they're afraid they're going to run it into the ground. There are actually things you can do by using non-family executives. Think of it as an old Harvard Business Review article that talks about the skip a generation technique for succession. And then the last thing that's important is you need to integrate non-family executives in particular, but people up and down the chart into the succession process. These are people who, many of them have given decades to this business. They are extraordinarily loyal to the business, and sometimes they hold a lot of the skill sets. They're critical in helping the next generation learn. And even though some of them might retire soon after the current gen does, they have a lot to teach. And you don't want them leaving because they feel disenfranchised. If we would go now to page 4. So this is a list of what I call do I have to questions. So do I have to use a corporate psychologist in all situations? No. How do I know that? There aren't that many of us who do this work, and yet succession happens every day. There are millions of businesses all across the country and all across the world that right now are doing succession. And me or folks like me are not in those situations. Also, the use of using behavioral expertise reactively when things aren't working proactively, it's not the best way to come into it. So years ago when I started, typically a family business was in pretty bad shape. So the family's been fighting for years. I get referrals mostly from accountants and attorneys, but I get referrals from priests. So my guess is a person's at a pretty low ebb when they speak to their priest after services and says, my kids are driving me crazy. And then I have one priest referral. Priest called me and said, we need to help this family. So what I'm finding though in the last 7 to 10 years is that families are being more proactive, and the current generation is earlier thinking about getting out of the business. So if I look at the scenarios I'm in right now, one ownership team is in their early 60s, one owner in another family business is in their late 50s, and another one is in their late 60s. So late 60s is the oldest, but 2 out of the 3 are, I'm 67. They're younger. And that just gives us more time. And there isn't that rush to, we got to get everybody involved. My wife and I, or my husband and I need to get out like in the next year. We can kind of figure it out. The importance of that gets to the next stuff. And actually in that second arrow, it takes a little while to create succession roadmap. So it also, if there is emotion involved, so I'm meeting with a family business currently, there's a lot of emotion and they're not willing to talk about it openly, but they act out with each other. Okay, I can't solve that in one meeting. But if a person says, in 2 months, Jim, we're out of here, I'm going, oh, well, this is going to be much harder. The other thing is that I like to make sure in my role of corporate psychologist that the family is effectively using their other advisors, and also not just using one advisor. So I know, all of us love our clients. We love most of them. And we want to maintain those relationships. Some of those relationships are decades old, but one advisor can't hold the entire relationship and block out other ones, because what happens is in the succession roadmap, there are going to be other things that come up that one advisor can't handle. So I ask questions like, so when are you going to meet with your accountant about this? Or, gee, you said you don't have a buy sell. You need to structure the deal to get out of here. So how are things going with your attorney? So I listen for things. Oh, we meet regularly. Oh, we began to sketch it out. Or my such and such advisor doesn't think this is important, or they don't have the skill set. So in my work and working in multidisciplinary teams, I do stumble on situations where you have an advisor who's been with a family since it was started, don't have the requisite skill set. I never want to get rid of an advisor, because there's a lot of trust in that. And what's the Italians call it? They hold the consigliere role. But I will say, can we add in? So I might say, okay, your accountant has helped you this far and that's great, or your attorney has. I wonder if we could add in somebody, and I will seek out a person in another specialty who is used to working as a team and understands when you get in there, your job is not to get rid of that current family advisor. Your goal is to work with them and complement them. And then the other thing that I do is I ensure succession keeps moving forward. So I was working with a family yesterday. We were working together for 2 months. They sort of came to a point saying, we think we got this now. So they have to work on some job descriptions. They have to work on an onboarding plan. And so they said, we'd like to take a whack at this. I said, then you should do that. But I said to them, I want to see copies of all that documentation. I want it by February 15th. I said, I hope you're okay that I just gave you a homework assignment. They said, yeah. They said, because that way you're going to make us actually do it. But also I know as I look at that stuff, if it's not in good enough shape to help one of the kids come into the business, I'll jump back in. If I haven't heard from a family in a few months and they said they're working on something, I'll call the owners and say, hey, we haven't met in a while. Can we do like a 15-minute check-in? I want to see if they're going, because a lot of these family businesses, because the process can be so difficult, they avoid it by saying, well, we just got busy and there's a surge in sales, or there's a new opportunity, or we're going to buy a building. I say to them, remember our agreement in the beginning? Once we start the process, we don't stop, because otherwise you're going to prevent your children from constructively becoming the next generation. You're going to hurt your business and you're going to be miserable. So say, can we get back on track? So that's the way that sounds. What I want to mention now also for the attorneys who are in the presentation today, who are at the presentation, is the first CLE code. So if you would write this down, as I think Karen mentioned in the beginning, you put that on your evaluation form. It is 4216. So I'll repeat that, 4216. I'll also say if you should misplace that, you can email me or just email Don. So that is the first code for today. If we can go to the next page, to page 5. So there are typical scenarios that I'm called in on, and this isn't, the complete set, but there are things where I'm pulled in. So the first one is parent adult child tension. Whenever I say child, I actually mean adult child. It's never actually real kids who are running these businesses. I know that's common sense, but the parent and the adult child tension spills into the family business. And either the non-family members are miserable or the family members are miserable. So there was a period of time, I guess it was about 15, 20 years ago, I kept on getting the same clinical referral. So that at that time, I had a full-time clinical practice. It was always the same thing. It was a person, mid-30s, depressed. It was like I had like 3 of them in a row. I'm going, is there something in the water all of a sudden? Why the same thing? And the first meeting always went the same way. So I'm pretty meat and potatoes in the way I approach clinical situations. So I said, so Bob, what brings you in today? What's going on? Well, I'm depressed. So a little common sense goes a long way. Why are you depressed? Well, my father's driving me crazy. Okay, you're 35 years old. How is your father so much in your life and driving you crazy? Well, I'm the heir apparent in a family business. And then it was always some version of the same story. Actually, in that actual story, I was able to help that heir to the business become undepressed, and also helped him work through a pretty difficult process of understanding that he's there as a choice. He does not have to stay in the family business. We had to work through his guilt and everything else. And then what's interesting is, as parents, because we're all parents and grandparents, we have a sixth sense. So the heir to the business came to the conclusion that after the first of the year, he's quitting the business. He's going to go into his own business. As he makes that decision, I meet with him 2 weeks later. He says, do you know what happened? I said, I don't know. I don't read minds very well. What happened? He said, my father just made me the president of the company and announced the succession timetable. He said, how did he do that? He said, you might not like the way he works with you, but it doesn't mean he doesn't observe. He was probably picking up on that you're getting antsy. And so as a result, he saw that he needed to do something or you were going to move on. Another one, selection of the top leader, which creates an impasse. So it's not unusual. I'll use a case from 10 or 15 years ago. Father calls me, says, I love my kids. I said, good, I like that. So what's going on? He said, I love my kids equally. I said, still good. What else is going on? There's 4 of them. One of them needs to become the CEO. I don't know how to do this. My wife and I have talked about it till we're like going nuts over this thing. We don't want to hurt anybody. We need an objective process for selecting the next CEO of our company. And we have run out of ways to be able to do that. So I explained to them, well, me or other folks like me, there are assessment processes. I can help you to work through that. But the parents are distraught by the time they see me. They've been thinking about this for years. And they confuse that equal love equals equal skills. And I break that to them, say, each of your kids are different. So another case study. I'm in a family business right now where I just did in-depth leadership assessments on the 2 heirs to the business. And so I'm meeting with the parents and I said, both of you have an embarrassment of riches. They said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, look at the 2 reports. Your kids are complementary to each other. One's more the outward facing one. One's more the inward facing one. So they replicate some of the ways that your business is managerially set up right now. So it breaks the impasse. They don't have to be co-CEOs, which I think that's a model that's fraught with difficulty, and we can talk about that some other time. Next thing, unresolved family conflicts that influence the family and non-family work relationships. So although it's less frequent now that I meet a company where the family is badly fighting, it still sometimes happens, but also there is disenfranchisement sometimes of non-family professionals who are critical to the lifeblood of the business. And typically what I'll find out is that it's that they haven't included the non-family members in the succession planning. So I'll pick an example. It's a business I'm not active in right now, but was very active in, and wasn't for succession, although succession was kind of in the background. A fellow owned the business. His COO was a non-family member, but was as close as a family member. And that COO effectively was running the business. The owner was doing some other things. And so I know when the time comes that that owner triggers succession, if he does not include the non-family COO, that person will become disenfranchised, it'll hurt the business. That COO is the lifeblood of that organization. So again, I think what you see in my approach on everything, be inclusive. It's one of my messages for today. The last one is generation gaps in the potential succession plan. So I mean generation gap, I mean like that old, the generation gap that we used to talk about in the 60s and 70s. Still, a lot of people still hold on to that. If I had a nickel for every time I've heard somebody do millennial bashing, I don't know if I'd be retired, but I'd be on easy street. That what I try to emphasize to parents, I'll say, I know you're frustrated, but do we need to use a stereotype? I'll say your problem is not that your kids are millennials. Your problem's number one, you've not shared some of your values about work with them. So we're going to fix that. That number two, you need to teach them to be resilient. So in that process, you're going to need to let them fail a little bit. And so, parents will say, oh, we don't want them to fail and we're going to lose money. I'll say, if you never let them experiment and fail, they're never going to become resilient. So I am in a family business right now where the owners or parents have done a lot of enabling of the next gen. And the raw skills of that next gen potential heir apparent, there's a lot of capability, but they've never been allowed to be in the business and fail. And they've never been held to the same standards as the non-family members. So basically, you've probably seen this, the kids get away with a lot. The biggest one is I see heirs to family businesses that have not been treated as non-family in the business. They come in late, so they might show up to work at 10. I guess the earliest I've ever seen somebody do it, this is at the beginning of my career. This heir to the family business would come in at 10 a.m. and leave at 2. They had a corner office, they drove a vet, and they made $100,000 a year. That's like a case study in enabling. And they never could take the business seriously. And so they acted out, making it so that there was a non-viable next gen. So I do try to teach the parents, I guess it's some lessons in tough love. So I want to toss this to you all for just a moment. I don't care if we can use the chat box for this. What are the kind of things that you've seen where you might go, maybe we should be bringing in a corporate psychologist? And again, I'm not marketing myself. There are a lot of people like me. But what are situations you're going, maybe we need something a little different here. The family's a little out of control. There's a little bit too much emotion. And then the big one is when one of you will call me, one of you will say, they're stuck. I was like, we've been like flapping our guns for succession for 5 years. They're no further along. What are some of the things that you all have seen? So Karen, if you can put the chat box up. So here's one from Michael Columbus. So there we go. Older child, make me the president or I quit. Classic, Michael. And that kind of stuff is reinforced in our culture at large. I'm the oldest. Also, where it gets even more confusing, I'm the oldest and I was the first one in the business. So, I put in the sweat equity. I should be it. Joy makes a good point also. They have trouble finishing the conversation because they don't want to create upset with their children, not realizing, congratulations, this is what succession feels like. But if a family's been conflict avoidant for 20, 30, 40 years, they'll say, can't like we do this nicely? I'm meeting with a family business this week. I know that's coming my way. I've met with the heirs of the business. They say that the current gen will not be open with them. The current gen is acting out. So you see that. Adopted children reviewed as not an heir. That one, Deborah, I've not seen. So that unfortunately gets to a deeper issue. Actually, Deborah, can I ask you a follow-up question? Was the adopted children reviewed as not an heir by the other sibs or by the parents?
By the other sibling.
Yeah. It's a child rearing issue. So I can speak from experience. One of our children is our biological child. One is adopted. We never talked about our adopted daughter or our biological son. And we were always open from the beginning that one is adopted. It's like, okay, you're our kid. We love you equally. So sometimes the problem is that old issues within the family rear their heads. That's fascinating. Issues with spouses of partners. Yeah. There is something at Steve that helps with that. These are great questions, by the way. I could do this all morning with you all. That it's funny, early on, I was working in a family business and the current gen, was parents, said, you got to include more people in this. And I didn't listen to them. And that succession plan went poorly. So from the beginning, I'll say to the people I'm initially meeting with, there's going to be a time early on we're going to involve your spouses. Why are we going to do that? I said, they're players in this. In every family business I've ever consulted, the non-owner spouse has enormous influence over the business. So I'll say to my peers, woe to you if you leave out the spouse who's not in the business, because they are the closest advisor to the owner. So in a scenario, I don't know if you've all ever heard of this technique, it's called a family council. The family council is a council of the family members that get together on a quarterly or twice a year basis, and they share information with each other. So it's a critical element for involving the spouses of partners or owners. Those are wonderful questions. Go to page 6, please. So what propels succession? All family members involved unite around the mission of succession. There's a lot about this is our legacy, runs very deeply in family businesses. The value also of the next generation continue to do good works in the community, including, as many of you are involved in, charitable giving, critical. And they see the family-owned business as an intergenerational asset. So those are things that keep everybody's eye on the ball as we work through these difficult issues. And also, there are values that are agreed upon in advance. So I met with a new family business to me, it was last week. And I started, we did our welcomes and introductions. And I said, we got to put some ground rules in place. And I start by, how are you going to talk with each other? So they said, we're always going to communicate in a respectful and high EI manner. And then when things come up, we're going to work our way through those things calmly and in a focused manner. And also, I'm picking up on, are you willing to defer to me every once in a while? I've been in so many succession scenarios. Allow me to be your guide, your Sherpa, whatever. They in the end can do whatever they want to do. But I'm saying to them, if you all can just treat this objectively, we will get this to the end. And also an acceptance that differing perspectives are understood, not eliminated. It's not unusual in the up and coming SIB teams that they criticize each other. He doesn't work hard enough. She likes to take things over. I've been in the business for a long time. He just arrived, 6 months ago. I'll say, value all of your perspectives. The diversity in thought and experience will make this a stronger company. Page 7, please. So the next thing I want to do is to prepare you for the exercise we're going to do. So I invented this, and I call it the Next Leader Impasse. There are 4 roles that each you're going to do based upon your professional affiliation. So it's sort of the typical scenario in a family business. You have a mother, a father, a son, a daughter. You know, looks kind of like the American deal. And also key non-family executives. A lot of businesses have them. It's somebody who might have been there at the startup. They know where everything is. They know how to do everything. So let me go through these real quickly with you. Read them along with me silently. So for the mother, that's going to be the attorneys at EPC. This is the role you're playing. I'm not officially in the business. My husband owns it, but I am his closest advisor. I feel our kids should be co-CEOs. So that's a non-owner spouse basically saying, our kids are equal. I love them equally. They should equally run the business. Father, those are going to be the CPAs and EPC. I own the business starting at 35 years ago. I'm the captain of the ship. I know what's best for everybody in the business. My daughter should be the next CEO, but this will crush my son. Pretty insightful dad, by the way. As I said, owners are coming to be much more insightful these days. Son, this is going to be for CFPs who are within EPC. I've been in the family for 12 years, starting right out of college. I put my sweat equity, plenty. All things considered, I've earned becoming the next owner and president CEO. So one of you, I forget the person who said it. I think Michael, you said it. This is owed to me. And there's a lot of that in family business. So there's a bad word in family businesses. Entitlement. I'm entitled to this. It's my turn. And I'll say, that's not the way this actually works. You know, it isn't your turn or whatever. Last one, key non-family executives. So this will be for CLU and CHFCs in the group. So it's, I've been in their business for over 35 years, starting at the bottom and working my way up to COO, my current role. I know how to some degree succession as a private family member, and the dad wants out, so something needs to happen. But given my operating knowledge of the business and understanding of the industry, as well as many years of loyal service to the business and family, I should be involved in the succession process. That's the tee-up. Karen, go to the next page, please. So hopefully you might have written your answers to this already. So I'm going to sort of shave this down to 2 minutes. But jot down some, like, pardon?
Just checking, we didn't go over the daughter question.
We didn't. And that's the most crucial one. EPC trust officers. I joined the family business 6 years ago, right after completing my MBA. I'd like to one day run the business collaboratively with my brother. With his operations expertise and my financial investing expertise, together as equals, we could grow the business tenfold. But I don't think he wants to share the top role. It's not unusual, actually, that the daughter is left out of the succession process. So I might have had something weird and unconscious going on there. But I'm in a scenario right now, I've been in multiple ones, where I hear about the invisible daughter. Oh, she's really smart, but she lives in South Carolina and she has a family and, you know, could be a physician or an attorney. It's usually something high-powered. The daughters are typically incredibly intelligent. Sometimes they've been in the business for a few months, hated it, and left. So there's a story there. But sometimes I'll say to the family, any chance of me instigating a conversation with the daughter? I'd like to just sort of find out why they left. And what I'm really nosing around at is there still any potential for that kid to get back into the family business? Karen, thank you. So let's jot down your answers real fast to these questions. And this is based on your role. So those roles are prescribed based upon what's on page 7. What are the challenges you'll face with your agenda for succession with other people involved in the succession process? So basically those other roles. As you feel your succession ideas are the right ones, how will you work with other family members to accomplish the succession? And then in light of their potential leader impasse, how would having the assistance of any of your outside advisors help your family more effectively move the succession planning forward? So some of you have some corporate psychologist skills. I have some rudimentary skills to trigger different financial and legal events. We overlap a little bit, so you can keep that in mind. So I'm going to time this. I want you to take about a minute to jot those things down, because you might have done it already. And then I'm going to go on. Okay, I'm going to go to the next page then. So in a moment, after I go over these instructions, Karen is going to break you out into your chat rooms based upon professional affiliation. I'll also note that because of the proportion of professionals and the number of people who are involved today, you could be in a room where it's like all attorneys or all accountants or all whatever. If that happens, just talk about, if you're on the same profession, talk about how you would make your case to be able to support that particular family member doing what I said in the description. So in the virtual chat, I'm going to shave some time off of this. I want to leave enough time for Kevin. So right now the chat goes on for 10 minutes. We're going to make that 6 minutes and make the debrief 1 minute. So at 6 minutes in, Karen, can you start the 60-second timer? You're going to see on your screen a timer is going to come up. After 7 minutes is over, it's going to pull you back into the group meeting. And then we're going to have about a 2-minute chat in the chat box. What did you learn taking on these roles? Okay. If Karen, you put people into their chat rooms, and we will reconvene in 7 minutes. Karen, thank you.
Everybody's surveying the crowd.
Okay, so you're going to see join a room, click join.
Dr. Jim?
There we go. I was answering a question for Deborah. Just want to finish answering that and I'll be fast. That she was interested in the family council concept. If you just Google family council and family businesses, there is an incredible literature on this. You'll find all sorts of helpful tips about how to set it up, what is it, what does it accomplish. So that's out there. And if you want to ask me more questions, Deborah, just email me back channel. So we're up to page 8 at this point. We did 8 also. So quickly in the chat bar on the right, some quick things about what were your takeaways from this? What did you learn? So if Karen, if you can put the chat box back up again. What are some of your takeaways? And just type them in. So lots of good stuff there. You know, Elizabeth, lots of competing interests. There are no straightforward answers. This is a process. It's not a straight line process. It's kind of wiggly. It's an ongoing process. Deborah, you're right. Nobody wants to budge. They don't want to, if you can take it as they don't want to budge for a reason, your job as a family advisor, go find the reason. And sometimes it's having some quiet talks with typically the owner and say, talk to me a little bit. Why do you think this is stuck? Certainly enjoy you talking about difficult decisions. It's the future of the business. It's the future of the family. Tom was saying, you know, one CEO is better than two. Amen, brother. You can't run a business by a committee. It just looks good on paper. That's all it is. Nancy's comments start talking earlier on. Make sure everybody's involved from the beginning. Sam's comments about you can't anticipate how others are going to respond. And that's why you want to create a process where they're talking with each other. And if you see they're stuck, you know, outside that meeting, speak to the top person in the business. Typically it's the owner saying, why do you think so-and-so isn't talking? Don't call them out in the meeting. Shaming somebody doesn't go well. Great learnings, everybody. Let's go to page 10. So Karen, if you can pull down the chat box and put up the presentation. Here it comes. Fantastic. You need to be ready to do this. A lot of it is mental readiness. It can't be done of, well, we'll just take a shot at succession. It can't be like you win the lottery and everything is okay. You have to plan for contingencies. People's noses are going to go out of joint. You know, as Joyce said, they're going to be difficult decisions. Some of you said it's not just a straight line process. People are going to be upset. And it's just be there with your clients. You're all used to doing that anyway, from the perspective of your profession. So I'm just encouraged to keep on doing it. It needs to be the right time for the owner. And they have to have the right attitude about it, which is we're going to see this through. Sometimes the spouses help each other. Quick story, I was involved in family business. This is 7 years ago. I'm still there, actually. I'm doing leadership training. But I did succession, and the father and mother were co-owners. The father wanted to avoid this. So I remember in our first meeting, it was in a September timeframe. He said, I think these are good ideas. We'll get to it in January. So I was looking at his wife, and she didn't want that. So I called her. I said, so what do you think about that January timeframe? She said, I'm going to fix this. Next meeting, succession began. Because I knew she had incredible power with her husband, even though he was the CEO. So it has to be the right time for the marketplace. With COVID, some businesses have been hit very hard. Sometimes it's the exact wrong time, and some businesses it's the exact right time. I want to now give the second CLE code for attorneys. It's 5174. I'll repeat that, 5174. Now I'm going to pass the baton over to Kevin. He's going to talk about two important topics for making succession important. One is a fascinating chart on succession readiness. I love this chart. And talking about the servant leader mentality. Kevin?
Thanks. So as you look at this, and you actually may have seen this, if you remember, from the Bar Association joint meeting last year in 2019, actually it was 2019, when we talked, we had a group talk about business succession at that time. And this is something that we just wanted to highlight that was incredibly important to all of us when we're thinking about it, is that most owners, they are usually not mentally ready to leave. And it's the reason that they started a business, was they wanted to do something on their own. So this is why we want somebody like Jim to be able to have as a resource to come in and utilize his skill set as well, is because if they're not mentally ready to go, it doesn't matter whether they're financially ready to go or not. And then the second area of this is that just the vast amount of business owners also do not have a side amount of dollars to have to be able to gift the business or just walk away from the business and not worry about its value. They are going to need to sell the business for an amount that allows them to be financially independent. So can you go, Karen, can you go to the next slide? And then when we're talking about it, we're talking about certain areas. We're talking about what we call serving leaders. We want the business to have a purpose. What is the purpose of the business? It isn't to just fund the family's vacations and colleges and whatnot. What is the greater purpose of the business, and how can that be trained to the next generation of the family? Bending the pyramid is really, how are you going to build from the bottom up? How are you going to allow the next generation to understand what it's like to not just be an owner, but also to be the people who work with the family, the outsiders that we talked about. Blazing the trail is the understanding that a business is going to change over time, and what made mom or dad's business really successful is not what's going to make the son or daughters or other family members' business successful. They have to be allowed to adjust and change to the new environment, or else their business becomes obsolete. Raising the Bar talks about, we're not just going to give this over to that child. We're going to make sure that they earn it. They have to want to earn it, and the parents have to want them to want to earn it. And finally, building on strength is, just as Jim talked about, is that not all people are built to be CEOs. So build on the strengths that you have. If none of your children are CEO material, none of them should be CEOs. So what can they be? What role can they play within the business? And build upon that strength. Don't build upon the weakness. Karen, you can move on.
So I'll add one thing in here. Again, I'm smart enough to say this, but I don't know how to do it. You will know how to do it. That if none of the kids can be the CEO, or let's say one kid, but there's 4 kids, they'll say, well, we need to make them equal so that they all can get the same amount of money from the asset. I said, no, you need to go back to your other financial advisors and find an alternative way for wealth distribution. I'll say to them, I just said that to you like a trained monkey. I don't know how to do that, but you have advisors who know how to do that. So you're not going to give them equal roles so they can have equal pieces of the asset. You're going to put them in the roles based upon their ability. And then for those who are not going to get that, a large enough salary or so forth, speak with your advisors and come up with an alternative method for wealth distribution. So I want to go back just very quickly to the importance of operational control. In the businesses I work with right now, the parents all will concede we can see a time that we will no longer be operating the business. But let's be honest with each other. What they say and what they do are sometimes different. And so in a family business, this is again about 6-7 years ago, Dad was the primary owner. He had a lot of hobbies. So he said, Jim, when I'm done, I'm out. I have so many things I want to do. I said, that sounds great, but I'm going to hold you to it. So then I'm still working in the business. So I'm working with Gen 2, and they're saying, he's not leaving. And we love him so much. We can't tell him to go. So it's, again, going, Joy, to your point, the difficult decisions and the difficult conversations. So I will hold their feet to the fire of, if you want to see your kids be spectacular in the running of your business, you need to give up operating control. But it doesn't mean you can't have a role in the business. So I'm in another business right now where at least some of the heirs are thinking that dad can stay, but in a different role. A lot of times the current gen goes back to what they did originally in the business, or they go into doing strategy, but they cannot control the entity, or succession never completely goes. Let's go to page 14, last page. So just some wrap-up ideas. I think it's well accepted at this point that the most effective way to do succession in a family business is a multidisciplinary approach. No one of us can do all of it. And that's where you get together with everybody. If you're seeing that multidisciplinary team's not coming together, call a meeting. With Zoom, this is pretty simple now. Hey, I've heard about you all. The family owner talks about you as their accountant, their trust officer, their attorney, their whatever. Let's get together and see where we are in this. It'll make it much higher percentage that succession will happen. Although it's not, required that every succession situation needs a corporate psychologist. I think what you were seeing in the list of issues that you noted in the chat box, there are a number of times where the family is stuck. There's too much emotion. They sibs pick on sibs, so you can't be the CEO because you're adopted. Ouch. So that those are the times, call in somebody like me. And in the beginning, we might just give you some pointers about this is what you could do next. I don't always need to get involved, but if I do, I'll talk through this is what it looks like. And then because you're bringing me in, I'm going to talk about this is my role, this is your role, and we do it in a very orderly way. Again, I think in choosing a corporate psychologist also, look at their expertise working with family businesses. They should have depth in working with a number of them. They should have high-level education. My preference is that they have no less than a master's degree, could be in business, could be in social work. My preference is a PhD in psychology. There's something about my training that readied me for this, and I didn't even know I was being readied for it. And then lastly, an ability and a willingness to collaborate with the other advisors. So I know we're 5 minutes over. I think I've probably broken 10 rules by saying the next thing I'm going to say, but can we go back to the chat box for just a couple of minutes? And if you all want to ask any further questions, I would be glad to answer them.
Dr. Jim, this is Rick Rivers. While you're putting your questions in, everyone, into the chat box, I was sent some by some attendees to my computer, so I want to ask these questions if I could. The first one is, at what stage of the family-owned business should an attorney raise the succession plan issue? Do you have guidelines on that?
Yes. I use age for part, and I look at their interest in the business. It's not just one. So as an attorney or an accountant, you have a lot of interaction with your clients. See if the owner's head's still in the game. So that's one thing I look at. But also I look at age. So if you're creeping towards the owners coming towards their late 50s and you've never had a succession discussion, trigger it. Be nice and say, Jane, you run a terrific business. You've been at this now for 30 years. You're printing money in your basement, but there's a time to think about succession. And if you don't want to do it, we're going to go down a certain course. If you do want to do it, you have kids who are interested. Can I begin a series of discussions with you? So that's the way I would handle that.
Jim,
Yeah.
This is Joy. I'm going to jump in and answer too, because I know Don was encouraging me to answer some questions.
Yes.
When I have my attorney hat on, where this has come up a lot for me is in the course of estate planning. And I alluded to that in my comments in the chat, that when you start to have that conversation with people, it will give you the real sense of whether they have given it enough thought. And often it's very difficult as an attorney to even finish a will, when somebody really is having trouble or is stuck on this. And that's where, Jim's set of skills or, starts to really become apparent. I also see it often in the trust officer world. A lot of times people start wanting to talk about retirement from a financial standpoint, and are they going to have enough money? But they think they know what their business is worth, and they don't really have a plan for what's going to happen if they get hit by the proverbial bus, or they, you know, want to enjoy some time in retirement. So those are kind of triggers. If you just can't get somebody to make a decision, I think that someone with Jim Kestenbaum's skills would be great to bring into the conversation.
Thanks, Joy. Are there some other questions, Don, also?
I don't see any others in the chat box. So I'm going to ask another question that somebody sent me. Who should hire the corporate psychologist? Some say it should be an attorney, so it's covered by attorney-client privilege, or should it be the client hire the corporate psychologist directly? And is that covered by a physician-client privilege?
Joy, you want to start with that?
Yeah, I think I know because I've asked you this question. As an attorney, we always have to think about who our client is. So members of the same family can have competing interests. They're not all our client. Who is our client? You may, you've said to me that you feel that the business is your client, that any decision you're going to make or any guidance is going to lead towards what's in the best interest of the business. Whereas as an attorney, we need to put our client's interest first. So there are some, guidelines in the rules of professional responsibility, but I think that I probably would not hire you as the attorney. I would probably recommend that the client hire you directly, but I'm sure there are people who would disagree with me, and I'd be interested in their perspectives too.
Any other thoughts out there?
I have one more question. Are there thoughts about Joy's answer? Anybody want to chime in? I don't want to cut you off, but I wanted to read this last question that was sent to me. If an attorney has reservations and concerns about the succession plan being proposed by other advisors, or the succession plan proposed by other advisors that the client is interested in pursuing, despite the attorney's stated reservations and concerns, should the attorney withdraw from the succession planning representation, or should the attorney accept the agreed plan after expressing those reservations and concerns in writing and then draw up the necessary documents?
I think every situation is different, and I think there's some guidance in the codes about withdrawing. In my experience, most business owners will take the factual information and interpret it and make the decision on their own. And they're more likely to fire the attorney than the attorney having to withdraw. And it's often the case, and that's really the benefit of bringing in someone like Jim, that they know what they want to happen, and they're going to take the steps to get there. So if I'm in that situation, I'm going to share my concerns directly, and I will withdraw if I feel that the plan that they're going forward with is not going to meet their stated objectives.
And likewise, also, Joy, I will do the same thing. If they're going down a road that I think is reckless, abusive, ineffective, and they're basically not using me as an advisor, I also recognize they own the business. I always say, I'm working for you, but I can't condone the process you're taking because it's going to hurt you, your family, and or your business. So I'll resign the gig. That's happened in non-family businesses in less than a handful of times. It's never happened in a family business. Typically, they don't fire me or fire themselves. They just temporarily stop the process, and then they do something else. And that one family was saying before, they could not stop yelling at each other. They sold the business. Somebody gave them an outrageous offer in millions and millions of dollars. So sometimes that's the resolution. So we don't get to the point of having to go to our professional codes. It's like something else happens and resolves it. But that's a very interesting. It shows also, just listening to your response, Joy, it shows the way that our professions are all set up a little bit differently. What is the code? How do you have to follow it? What's the limit of privilege? So that was a fascinating answer.
Well, Jim and Joy and Kevin, I want to thank you for a very informative and thought-provoking presentation this morning. Because we're not here in person, we cannot present you with a token of our appreciation. So instead, we send out gift cards. Would like to let the guests and members know that our next meeting is Tuesday, March 2nd, and it will be a Zoom meeting. The topic is Medicare, Medicaid, and healthcare cost considerations during retirement. Our speakers are Jason Livingston, attorney, and Vicki James from Medicare Easy. The coordinator is our own Maria Caton. Just a reminder to complete the speaker evaluation form, which will be sent to you by email. Stay informed and be safe. We'll see you next time.
Thank you, everybody. Pleasure meeting you.